All right, so first thing I do is I look around on the internet for whatever type of beer I happen to be in the mood for. Today I'm doing a simple Hefeweizen. And you can see there's not too many ingredients here. I got 3 types of grain, 1 type of hop, and the yeast. And right now I'm in the process of weighing out my grains. I got my little scale here, and one of the fun parts about brewing your own beer is you can kind of make whatever you want, get crazy. What I found is that the crazier that I get, the less success and the less I usually like the beers. So I think I usually stick with simplistic. Not to say I won't throw in something crazy every once in a while, but I like a good Hefeweizen. This is a pretty simple one, and I'll go ahead and go from here. First, like I said, I got my grains here. I'm weighing them out, and I'll dump this one out, and then we'll check in too. Okay, next thing I roll through here is I got all my grain got all weighed out here, you can see my bucket, and I got this this mill here, and it's not an expensive mill, but it works. I hooked a bolt on the end here, and what I do is I go ahead and take some grain, okay, and I throw it in here, and I have my mill set here to kind of be pretty fine. You don't want it so fine that you're completely pulverizing the like the husks off the 2-row. You don't want to pulverize those. Those help with creating your base for your mash and allowing that water to or the wort to flow through and get the sugars out. But I go pretty fine, and I think it's usually not too big of a concern. I usually don't have trouble. So like I said, I got my garbage here. I got my drill, and I hook her up right here. And then I just let her rip. It goes ahead and goes in the box, and then I go ahead and I'll do up my 10.25 pounds or so. I'll see you later. Okay, so I have I have all my grain stirred up here, or I should say ground up, and I have my water here. This is a mash tun. That I put my grain and heat my water to the point that we want my mash temperature to be. My mash temperature, I usually mash around 153 or so, and that allows the conversion to sugar for the grains. So I have that, and I'm going to add those now here. I got my spoon here, my thermometer, and then I have some salts. Now, you don't necessarily need to get into doing all this fancy stuff with salts and whatnot. What I've found, though, is that you may as well throw it in a brewing calculator. I use, I think, something called the EZ Water Calculator spreadsheet, and I got a laboratory assessment of my water, and it lets you ensure that your pH is at the right levels, which people believe can have a big effect on your beer. And when I started doing this, I did start to notice I think it tastes a little better. So now I'll add my grain to my mash tun. Okay, you can see here now I have all my grain is in here, and I'm kind of giving it a final mix before I'm going to put the cover on to my mash tun. For about an hour to allow that conversion to take place. You can see here I have my spout. That's where my mash will come out into my pot. One more thing about the water. I'm out in the garage now, but I heat my water. I usually do 5 gallons of water, and then use a calculator to figure out what the temperature is that I should have in my mash tun to reach the proper mash temps. Okay, so here I am an hour later. I've started to drain the wort from the mash tun a little bit, but as you can see, I have a pitcher in there, and my first runnings from the mash tun after an hour, you let just flow into a pitcher here, so that you don't get too much sediment in your final beer. This is something that's easy to do, and you just go ahead, fill up your pitcher, and then you, following that, you just go ahead and turn off your thing. And I usually do 2, so I'll do my first one here, and then you go ahead and dump these nice wort runnings right back in the top here. You don't want to disturb the top too much. That's your grain bed. And then you go ahead and like I said, I do 2, so I'll fill another one and then start draining into the kettle. Okay, you can see all the water is drained out of my mash tun, but I only have a half full pot here. So I want a 5-gallon batch. It's about a 7-gallon pot, so I want to gather 6 gallons. That's about up to those rivets there. So a lot of the water, the 5 gallons I initially put in, just gets kind of absorbed in the grain, and I get about half my runnings on the first time. So what do, right? We have here our sparge water. Sparge water I warmed up to about 175 on the stove, brought it out here. And this is another 5 gallons. And this will help re-rinse these grains and get us to our 6 gallons to start the boil, which will boil down to 5 at the end. I also turned on my propane right now so I can get it to a boil as fast as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and mix these in and go ahead and drain back into my pitcher a couple times and then fill my pot. Okay, you can see I have my 6 gallons here, and I've actually started a little bit of a boil going. This is going to be a 60-minute boil, and what you're going to find is that for the first, especially with how close the top of my pot is and how my pot is just barely fits all my wort, you got to be careful that you don't boil over, especially within the first 10 minutes or so. You always got to keep an eye on it. So right now you can tell I'm kind of going up and down on my lever here to get as vigorous as I can without going over. And what I usually do here is let this calm down a little bit and be at a spot where I'm comfortable with it, at least semi-comfortable, and then I'll add my 60-minute hop addition, right? I've already weighed out my hops here, and I'll add those when I calm down a little bit here. Seems like it's starting to equal out a little bit. Whoop, maybe not. And these hops, this is a Hefeweizen, so I only have a 60-minute hop addition. I don't have any hop additions at the end, so this is for bittering only. If you're doing something like an IPA or something like that, you'll probably have a lot of hop additions at the end. And what you'll find is when you add your hops, you'll usually get a little bit of a boil up too, so you'll want to stay around for a minute or two after you had your hops. So here, I'll go ahead and add my 60-minute hops and go ahead and start my timer here. Okay, about 15 minutes left in my boil here. You can see I've lost, you can tell that the rivets are more exposed now. And now we add our wort chiller, which I'm going to end up hooking up some hoses to. And what this does is helps us cool this wort off to a temperature that we can pitch our yeast in, so our yeast can do its thing. If you pitch too hot, your yeast are going to die. And at this point, after the end of the boil here, this is when it's most important to be sanitary with the things you do. So adding the wort chiller at 15 minutes lets you kind of have it automatically sanitize itself with the boiling water, right? So I throw her in, get her going a little bit, boiling, then it'll sanitize itself. The other part I kind of do right now is get my carboy sanitized. I have my bucket of sanitizer, and you can see my bubbly star sand here. You get it sanitized with the star sand, and you've probably read before or heard being sanitary is a big part of brewing, so that's true. Last, what I do now is get my hoses hooked up outside. You can do this many methods. If it's cold, you could throw this in a snowbank. That was the method I started with, but man, that can take hours to cool down, at least in my experience, but you can find other ways to do this. I just hook up my hose to the house spigot, and then you run it through one side of the wort chiller here. The cold water runs through and runs out the other side, and then you can cool her off pretty fast. All right, you can see that I brought my pot outside here, got my hose going to the spigot on the house, and then I got a hose just draining a bunch of water out into the snow there. Okay, I got wort's chilled down to about 70, and now I take my hydrometer here. So the hydrometer, you can kind of see here, it'll measure, I got a little fog or something going on my screen. Anyway, it measures the amount of fermentable sugars that you got out during your process of mashing and boiling. So you kind of let her drop in, and then it I like to get it out of this foam a little bit, but it floats, and you can read where your fermentable sugars are at. Okay, see there, I've moved the wort from my pot to my carboy now, and I still have my funnel in there though. At this point, it's time to pitch the yeast. Okay, so here goes my yeast. Yep. That's the money shot right there, y'all. The other thing, you'll see all this foam in here. A lot of this is just me shaking it around afterwards, which adds some foam. But some of it is the sanitizer I use leaves a little bit of foam in the star sand. You know, a lot of people might say, hey, get it out of there the best you can, and I do. I dump it as much as I can, but one of the sayings you always read is don't fear the foam. So I don't. Okay, you can see here now I got my fermenter. It's been a couple days, but you can tell my yeast took off, and I don't have a blow-off tube here. I've used them before, but again, I've tried to optimize this to be as lazy and easy of brewing as possible. So I switched over to kind of doing some of that firm cap S. I do one drop if I see it's going to get to the top, and luckily I looked right when it did, and I put a drop in, and it didn't flow through the top here, so we're good. Anyway, you can kind of see a little bit of movement still. I should have taken a video yesterday. It was going crazy, but it's just about done. And you can see this is this fermentation chamber here, which can cool down the wort to get it at the right temperature for fermenting. That's one of the important things as well, is that you have a good fermentation temperature. I have a heat tape in here that runs, and then a fan that kicks on if it gets too hot, and then I put, you can see I put these ice jugs back here, and it blows in the cold air to cool it where it needs to be. I give this probably, I don't know, it'll be done fermenting here, and where you can see movement at all, and probably I would say 3 days at the most from now. It's already been 3 days, and then I'll give it another 2 weeks or so, and get her in the keg. Okay, well, I forgot to take a video of me putting it in the keg, but pretty much when you go from the carboy, you just throw it in the keg, and you could bottle too, but I like to keg, and I have the setup for it, so I throw it in the keg and carb it up, and here I am now. Donosborn is one of my inspirations on YouTube. I don't think he has any videos that are obnoxiously long like this, but one of my favorite things he does in his videos is he's got a fancy dancy shelf on his kegerator, and he always pours his beer right in with his glass sitting right there. So this is my my attempt to mimic that, and here's the Hefeweizen that we created. There we go. Come on. Come on. Oh yeah. So it's taste-wise, oh, it looks great. It's cloudy. It's what I want it to be. It's what a Hefeweizen should look like, and the taste too. It does have that banana and that clove, and I really think it's one of the best beers I've ever made. So if you made it this far through this video, I give you credit. Go buy yourself a Hefeweizen, but you know what? Get out there and brew too. It's easy. It's not hard. Do it up. Go Packers.